I'm Dr. Sarah Olivo.
And I'm Dr. Liz Seidler, and you're listening to College is Fine, Everything's Fine. Hi, Sarah. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Liz.
Woo-hoo!
It's so fun to just now be seeing you in the year 2023. All right, for the audience, let's just fess up. How many takes is this?
I mean, a couple with you present, a couple with you not present. I mean, we're like basically take 10.
But I do really, truly wish you a Happy New Year. That part is
You
true.
too.
That's why I've had to say it so many times.
Oh, you too. I mean, I was just going to set a New Year's resolution to get better with technology, but I don't think that's wise.
No, and plus, I think you and I both know that we're not really big on resolutions anyway. Those like big, huge goals that we're all bound to break, and we feel bad when we break them, and it's just like a recipe for disaster or perceived failure.
Right. So I'm just going to work on finding the humor and really focusing on the laughs and be glad that I'm doing this with you and not by myself.
Yeah, no, completely, because at least we both know we have a partner in crime when it comes to not being able to figure out technology. But, we've made a lot of strides. I do think that at some point in time, our audience should have access to our blooper reels. I don't know when we're going to have access to that ourselves because we'd have to go back through. It's just there's so much to show.
There's so much.
Yeah. So one day when we have all the time in the world, we'll go back through and give that to you guys. I think you and I wanted to start with something small to give people so that it didn't feel like there was an overwhelming goal to do. This, what we're going to talk about today, which is savoring, is very simple, very quick, and tends to give some pretty good results.
I know. I was amazed. I feel sometimes really confident that I know everything that's going on in the field of psychology. And then I hear about something and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so portable and tangible and concrete and accessible. So I was really excited that Sarah, you connected with our guest today.
Yep. So we're going to be talking about, like I said, savoring. And there are 3 ways to savor. But before we get there, savoring is essentially appreciating and enhancing positive things, experiences, feelings in your life. We will not go into the nitty-gritty of how this is different than things like mindfulness. We're not going to go into all that. Just know that it is. And it's about purposefully bringing up and then noticing positive things in your life. And there are 3 ways to notice it. You know, Liz, you said it's like a Christmas carol, the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future. Well, this is, savoring. So we have savoring the past.
Just reminiscing. For example, thinking about the funny moment that Sarah and I just had when we thought, everything was lined up, ready to go. And again, we had a failed mission. Or, a time that I actually do this, I didn't realize it was called savoring, but I can kind of close my eyes and reenact like a wedding, which is a really positive memory that I have. And I can feel the emotion of that day. And that would be an example of savoring the past when we kind of reminisce about past memories or experiences that we've had.
Don't you wish we could actually go back in time and attend people's like weddings or different parties just to go for like a split second? Okay. The other one is savoring the present, savoring the moment. And that might be a little closer to mindfulness. It's just this idea of when you are enjoying something to pay attention and be fully in that moment. We all know the idea of savoring a meal. You can savor all sorts of things in your life. If I'm trying to have a drink with a friend, I won't enjoy that as much if I'm trying to think about where I'm going to be going next. It's so much nicer to sit and just have the coffee, have the drink, talk to that person, enjoy a group of friends. And if I don't have to think about my to-do list or think about the last time I went to something and it wasn't as fun or a party I wasn't invited to, it kind of ruins the current moment. So savoring the present is the second type.
And just quickly, Sarah, what I love about that is that most people probably are aware that our brain tends to like to focus on negative things, like the things you just said, like our to-do list or the last time I was here, what went wrong. And savoring is a really awesome technique to really focus on almost like soaking up every ounce of positivity from an experience in an intentional way so that you're kind of doing the opposite of what our brain naturally likes to do, which is to focus on the negative.
And
Yeah, go.
I was gonna say, our brain does that to try to protect us. It's ultimately trying to say what could go wrong. So we have to sometimes practice the opposite when we're in safe and happy situations.
Okay. Savoring the future is anticipating future life events that would be positive. So, for example, it's January in Connecticut, guys. I mean, it does kind of feel like spring, but I know in about a week it's going to be about 19 degrees when I wake up in the morning. So my savoring the future is I'm going to the Bahamas in April, and I can just close my eyes and anticipate what that pina colada is going to taste like, what the feeling of the rays against my skin. I can really visualize that. That would be like savoring the future, trying to really anticipate in a positive way something that's going to happen.
And sometimes when I'm feeling like I've been doing a lot, you mentioned earlier to me that you had been running around like crazy for your holiday. You really weren't able to sit. Sometimes when I'm just running around like crazy, or, for the students listening, you just finished a ton of exams or you're in the middle of exams, it can actually be nice to savor rest, to think through, when I get done with this exam period or with this big paper, I can just sit. A friend of mine, we can go see a movie, or I could just relax and take an early nap in my bed. It's nice to savor both of those things, to anticipate both of those kinds of things. And what's really cool is your brain produces the same chemicals with reminiscence and with anticipation as it does when you're actually in those situations. So this is probably why savoring works. It's creating more of that positive brain stuff. So one exercise that I sometimes do with people when it comes to attention and what you attend to is I do this with my kid clients, my college clients, and even my grown-up clients, just to get them walking around the room a little bit. Have you ever tried this? I put a pebble in their shoe, and then I give them a piece of candy or like a Hershey's Kiss. And I'll say, okay, I want you to walk around, and I want you to notice the pebble. And then they walk around, and they say it's like unpleasant. Okay, now walk around and notice the candy. And they'll walk around. They're like, okay, that actually tastes good. That's delicious. And then I'll have them walk around and just say, see where your mind naturally kind of takes you, and we learn from there. Everyone's a little bit different. So savoring is like that idea, which is to say we're probably naturally attending to the pebble, but we're asking you to say, okay, there are good things too. So see if you can transfer your attention to the metaphorical candy.
Okay, Sarah, it's not really it's not really a metaphor, but it's somewhat like one. And we couldn't be starting the new year without some sort of metaphorical exercise.
I know. I just don't know what I do without my metaphors.
I know, it's your strength. I appreciate it. Okay. So there's a lot of benefits to savoring. And here are some of the documented ones, some of what the research has shown. One, and Sarah and I talk about this a lot, it's like, how can you kind of buffer against stress or kind of increase your emotional resiliency to be able to handle stressful life events? And big surprise, being able to savor more positive emotions tends to be beneficial during stressful events.
Yep. I also think that when you savor in your relationships, you might notice or attend to some things you hadn't noticed before and appreciate your relationships. There's this phrase, you can't learn while you're talking. So maybe you can savor a conversation with someone. And if there's somebody that you're trying to get to know better, that would really work out well. And we could list it all. There's all sorts of research out there, but essentially savoring is good. We've got the science, so you should do it. Yeah?
Just do it.
Okay, just do it. Now, listen. We're going to come back at the end of this with some practical ways you can savor, some suggestions. I'm a big fan of, creating essentially some skills folders or photo albums in your phone and things like that to create ways to engage in some of the CBT skills we give people, but we'll come back with some suggestions for you at the end. Our guest is so impressive. You're going to hear more about her in a bit, but her name is Felicia Rosen, a recent graduate of Skidmore, and she really is going to be talking more about how savoring in particular can help people who have pretty big anxiety in their life. We wanted to talk to Felicia because she's young. This is her research. It's exciting. And this is a scientific study. So they're going to be trying to figure out what's going to be helpful for a clinically anxious population. What does that mean? That just essentially means that your anxiety is getting in the way of things for you. It's impacting your mood. It's keeping you from doing the things you should be doing in a day-to-day way, or it's giving you chronic stomach aches. It's essentially worrying almost all of the time. And that's what she means when she says generalized anxiety disorder. The truth is that we all have worry, whether it's all day, every day, or just some of the time about a problem in front of us. So when you're listening, just know that even though this was done for people who meet that, what we call criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, it can also still be helpful if you're in a time where you feel worried. If that's not so much you, but you're curious about savoring, that's fine. Go ahead, just fast forward a little bit to the exercises, and we'll be able to give you some ways to do it on your own, whether you have a great deal of anxiety in your life or not. But we do know it's helpful regardless of your anxiety levels. It's helpful across the board, and it can only lift you up from where you are. Well, I was going to say, if you have already got it figured out and you feel pretty great all the time and you've got all your shit together and you've got no problems, call us right away.
Oh my gosh.
And tell us how you do it.
Yes. We'd love to know.
But for the rest of us, we'll hear what Felicia has to say. So Liz, here's how I got to know Felicia. And by got to know, I mean met briefly when I was at ABCT, and I went to a poster session essentially about, I think it was, something around doing research in liberal arts colleges, how to create an understanding that small liberal arts colleges have a lot of research going on. And Felicia, what was it that you won? You won their, what we call a
student
poster
poster
session.
award. Yeah.
But for the people who don't know what a poster award is, or think a poster is just something you hang on your dorm wall, what does that mean?
I mean, I essentially made a, cardboard. It was one of the special interest group posters. And so I basically had to summarize my thesis that I did as an undergrad and kind of just put it all on this cardboard poster. And then people come by and you present it to them. But because I won the student poster award, I also got to give a talk at the meeting that they had. So that was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
And it's not just something you hang on your wall. Yes, it's called a poster because you're supposed to put all of your research on a poster. But ultimately, it's research that you are doing yourself, oftentimes as an undergraduate. And you get to, for the first time, go to a conference of professionals and share what you've done and what your results are. So it sounds like, oh, it's just a poster session. But in fact, it's really a first step to showing off your big brain to other psychologists. And I was so impressed by Felicia when she got up and spoke. And I thought the topic was fantastic when we are thinking about what are things some college students might want to know about and what is a brief skill that we could teach them quickly. And you talked about savoring, which we're going to get to in a minute, but also you were so well spoken and you had what would you say? Magenta hair? Like anytime someone's well spoken with magenta hair, am I getting the color right?
No, I'd say magenta. I'd say you got it right.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm like, I'm not colorblind. Yay. I was like, we got to get her on. So I ran up and I said, I'm Sarah. I'm, nice to meet you. And I just threw, I think like a flyer in your face. I said, we'd love to have you on.
And here we are. Okay.
So, all right. With that said, Felicia, why don't you go ahead and just introduce us? Let us know a bit about you.
All right. My name is Felicia. I just graduated from Skidmore College in May. While I was an undergraduate, I was a research assistant in 2 different labs. In one of them, I was the lab manager, and I also completed a research thesis where I designed and ran a study on savoring, worry, and generalized anxiety disorder, which I'll obviously talk a lot more about. I also did some clinical experiences while I was at Skidmore. I worked with adults with developmental disabilities, and I interned on a psychiatric unit for children. And I now am living in New York City and working at the Child's Mind Institute as a research assistant in the Autism Center. Oh, and ultimately, I hope to get a doctorate in clinical psych and be a therapist.
Ready to run the world already.
I know
Yeah, definitely.
these college students never fail to amaze Sarah and I in terms of accomplishments. Well, my dissertation was on generalized anxiety disorder and worry. So I'm
Oh,
very
cool.
intrigued. And I would say
Hmm.
it's a difficult to treat population, I would say, right, Sarah?
Absolutely.
People who struggle with like chronic and persistent worry. Um, it's a pattern of thinking that's really resistant at times to treatment. So I'd love to hear more about kind of your objectives in terms of doing the research and your findings.
Yeah, definitely. So, prior to coming up with my thesis in my lab, we were talking a lot about contrast avoidance. And that was something I was really thinking a lot about and something that I really wanted to at least address somewhat in my work. So I can like briefly describe what contrast avoidance is. It's essentially for individuals with generalized anxiety disorder, a sudden shift from like positive or neutral emotions to negative emotions is thought to be really aversive for that population. It can be like a really feared experience. They don't want to be, neutral or happy and then suddenly have a negative experience, like an unexpected negative feeling. And so those with generalized anxiety disorder are thought to then essentially cut off positive emotions or reduce them, and instead kind of use a state of worry and, a lot of worry and anxiety in order to kind of brace themselves for any negative possible experiences to kind of prepare for the worst. And so as I was learning about contrast avoidance, I knew that that was something I really wanted to think about with my research,
And
especially because it's just so interesting to think about how to, combat that.
absolutely. And I was going to say, Felicia, for Liz and I, who are working in the room with
Hmm.
people who have generalized anxiety disorder, we can get into the definition of that in a second. But anything you're describing
Hmm.
here would be helpful for when people are in a worried state in general. We're going to talk a bit more about savoring. So I think any advice you can
Hmm.
give could be helpful for people who find themselves in a worried state in general. But you mentioned contrast avoidance, and how we might see that in the
Hmm.
office is when somebody is a worrier and they might come into our session one day. And Liz, you share what you think too, but they would say, I'm actually feeling really good and I'm nervous about that. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Hmm. Hmm.
So clinically, that's a phrase I hear a lot, something along the lines of, I'm actually feeling okay and that doesn't sit right. What's going to happen next? Liz, do you feel like you have anything like that?
Definitely.
Definitely think one of the factors that I see in my practice is that people develop some of these avoidance strategies that maintain worry. And they really are terrified to experience even a more negative, anxious state and avoid even more positive states because they're
Hmm.
constantly in this state of preparedness for a future threat.
Yeah, I was, thinking a lot about contrast avoidance in my work and also like relaxation. Oh, what's the word? Relaxation induced anxiety. People who have like anxiety responses to relaxation and how, just feeling peaceful or happy can make people worry because it feels like you're not like ready for something bad to happen.
All right. So we've already gotten super excited and nerded out by the topic of contrast avoidance
Hmm.
and talked about what that can actually look like in real life. So then the big
Hmm.
word, and one of the things we're the most interested in hearing more about, is this idea of savoring. Talk a little bit more about this part of your study that focused on savoring.
Yeah, absolutely. So, savoring, just like to give a basic definition, is a positive psychology practice where you attend to and try to increase your positive emotions and experiences. So, you try to really tune in to any positive experience or emotion you're having and just try to amplify and extend the duration of it as much as you possibly can. And so savoring can look like a lot of different things. You could savor internal experiences, you could savor present moment sensory experiences, you could savor past or future experiences. It can be a lot of different things. In my study, I focused mainly on having people savor pictures and videos. But yeah, that's like kind of generally what savoring is. And my advisor had done a study previously looking at savoring treatment for college students with generalized anxiety disorder and found that it was really effective. They did a week-long randomized control trial where they had people either savoring or doing a control on their phones. And so that was found to reduce worry and increase positive emotions over that treatment period. And so in my study, we kind of wanted to look at savoring in the moment for worry and for generalized anxiety disorder.
So a lot of times when, especially when, the three of us can get so into all these words, but if
Right, right.
I'm walking around campus and I'm thinking about the various ways people can savor, and sometimes I would even say, if I'm a fly on the wall and I'm watching someone savor, or if I'm in someone's head and I'm
Mhm,
watching them savor in these different ways, what are some examples before you get into the study aspect? What are some examples
mhm.
of different ways people could savor a situation?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think it can a little bit depend on what you are savoring, but if I was, say, watching a TV show I really enjoyed and wanted to savor it, um, I personally would just try to, remind myself, first of all, that I'm doing something I enjoy. I find that even the basic level of that can be really helpful for me personally. I sometimes like forget to tune into the fact that I'm having a positive experience and just really try to tap into those positive emotions and really pay attention to them and try to increase them as much as possible. So you could focus on aspects of what you're doing and why you like them, stuff like that. And then I also just, oftentimes will try to savor not even external experiences that I'm having, but internal experiences, focus on like a happy feeling that I have when I'm spending time with my friends or a feeling of accomplishment when something good happens to me, stuff
What
like
about a
that.
memory? Because you mentioned past.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can definitely savor memories. It's, I think, a great practice. I tend to focus personally on savoring the present just because that's something that I personally feel like I was doing less of before I started practicing savoring. But I think it can be a really great tool to be able to, you know, in moments especially of stress, to be able to pull up, past experiences and really focus on the positive feelings from them.
Gotcha.
It sounds like similar in some ways to mindfulness, which Sarah and
Mhm.
I have spoken a lot in previous episodes. And at the same time, it seems like it has a narrower focus and possibly attending more to positive experiences and feelings. Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say the main difference between the two is that mindfulness obviously is non-judgmental awareness and savoring is judgmental awareness. It's, focusing on the positive specifically. And so I love mindfulness. I think it's a great tool. For me personally, sometimes when I practice mindfulness, I find that, when I'm just tuning into my thoughts and experiences as they just are naturally, they can be tend to filled with a lot of worry or negative thoughts or rumination, and so when I specifically tune into the positive and practice savoring, that can sometimes, I don't know, especially in worrisome circumstances where I'm really worried or anxious, be a really great tool for me.
I know we forget that judgments can be positive and negative, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, I think that's a great sort of way to untether those two terms. Okay.
Mhm,
So, you were interested in contrast avoidance and people who had GAD and this concept of savoring.
mhm,
So, then what
mhm.
happened?
I mean, so my thesis advisor and I definitely went through a long process of deciding exactly how we wanted to narrow in on what we were going to look at. And we ended up wanting to do an in the moment practice in the lab. We wanted to teach people to savor and then essentially see how it could help them in a situation where they were worried. So we decided to do, teach people to savor, have them practice savoring a couple times, and then have them undergo a worry induction, make them, think about something that they find really worrisome. We just used one that had been used in previous studies that essentially asks people to sit there for a few minutes and think of their most worrisome topic and worry about it as much as they can, which is very simple, but I think especially for college students who have plenty to worry about, very effective. And then we had people either watch a neutral video, which was just this like compilation of product videos of these really boring tables with like narration of the dimensions, or watch a video that they had chosen prior to coming into the lab that they found to be really positive. So it was like a personally chosen positive video that specifically brought up a lot of positive things for them, and asked them to savor it as they had done with a couple practices prior to the worry induction. Um, to see kind of what effect savoring versus, just kind of a neutral distraction had on people, especially in like situations of high worry.
And it's funny because when I first heard you describe the neutral, video of the tables and dimensions,
Mhm.
I was laughing to myself like, oh my gosh, this is assuming someone has not dealt with some sort of IKEA moment where they were petrified of table dimensions and were like, shit, the dimensions don't fit, but I mean,
Yeah,
that
I mean,
just
you
goes to
never
show
know
you how many
what's gonna
times
be
I've
neutral for people.
moved put together an IKEA table.
See, when I was first telling my mom actually about the design of my study, she had the opposite reaction. She was like, "I love looking at furniture. I would be so happy to be watching that video." Like, it would bring up positive emotions for me because I would be thinking about what tables I wanted to get or whatever. And
Oh
I was
my
like, "I
God.
don't know, mom. I think most 20 somethings are going to be a little bored of the basic
Yeah,
tables."
it
Yeah.
really just is more of an I don't know, a testament to midlife than it is on anything else. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's definitely
Savor
interesting
your
trying to
youth.
come up with
Savor your
yeah.
youth is the point.
It's interesting trying to come up with things, and just kind of know what they're going to, bring up for people emotionally. We also had to think of what was going to be positive pretty much universally and what was going to be, universally distracting. Like we had a distractor task in between the first couple instances of savoring and the worry induction. And it was just really interesting, trying to think of, okay, what are at least most people going to like have the same emotional reaction to?
I'm dying to know, Felicia, what did you find?
Mhm. Oh, yeah. So we found, first of all, we assessed people for anxiety, depression, their naturalistic or like day to day levels of savoring, at the very beginning of the study. And first of all, we found that people who did the study who met criteria for generalized anxiety disorder had really low levels of naturalistic savoring. They really weren't savoring much in their day to day lives or focusing on the positive. However, in the lab session, for all participants, the savoring condition reduced worry, reduced anxiety, and increased positive emotions after the worry induction significantly more than the control, which was very exciting to see that the practice was really effective. And this was actually surprisingly not different for those with generalized anxiety disorder and those without. We thought that due to contrast avoidance, those with generalized anxiety disorder might benefit less from savoring, might, have less of a positive reaction to it. However, we
Mhm.
found that the benefits were not significantly different, and participants with and without generalized anxiety disorder had a lot of great benefits from the practice in the moment,
That's
And
which was a very
awesome.
so,
encouraging finding. Yeah.
and again, I know that it's with research, you have to be really careful about what conclusions you draw, but it
Of
sounds
course.
like, in short, this worked for people whether they were big time worriers or not.
I mean, yeah, at least in our in our sample it did, which was, really exciting. Yeah, one might think that people, who experience a lot of worry would kind of have an anxious response to, trying to experience these positive emotions. But we found even in prior to the worry condition, when we were just having people savor a photograph and then a video, just after learning about what savoring was, those with generalized anxiety disorder or who met criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, had durations of, say, positive emotions and intensity of positive emotions equal to that of those without generalized anxiety disorder. So, in worrisome conditions and in non-worrisome conditions, savoring was really, effective for them.
Yay!
Yay!
I
Yay,
mean,
savoring!
And we all celebrate.
Yeah.
Is that what
no,
you
what I
wrote in your conclusions?
yeah.
Pretty
Yay!
much. In conclusion,
um
yay.
what I love about this concept, Felicia, is it's pretty concrete. I think it's and even
Mhm.
just like the name, I think people can like understand what the intent is behind the strategy. And the other thing I really love about it is that it's portable. It's very easy to implement. When I'm
Mhm.
working with college students and in this like stressful exam time, the things that they would normally do to accumulate more positive emotions are more challenging to implement. And so I'm always kind of
Mhm.
talking to them about like their emotional savings account and how we can kind of buffer against stress. And it sounds like this is something that really could benefit them to practice when they're
Mhm.
in these more vulnerable, stressful periods of time. And it's doable. It seems very manageable. It's not like running 7 miles when, you have, I don't know, 5 exams that day. It's just like not
Mhm.
feasible sometimes to do the things that you used to do that helped buffer against stress.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in our lab session, all it took was really having people savor while watching a 3-minute long video. It's a very short practice. It can be even shorter. It can, you don't even need a video necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But, these people had really high levels of worry. And then, after 3 minutes of savoring a video, it had really helped them. So I think it's great that it's a practice that can be so like convenient and feasible for people.
Right. I mean, when we talk about microdosing, a lot of times, to Liz's point, I'll work with someone on saying, okay, if we can't do like the kind of big capital version of what you want to be able to doing, sort of a, to your point of taking the long run or watching a really great funny TV show, which you can't always do. And it's exam time, for instance, how do you do the microdose version of
Hmm.
everything? And if you sort of have a lot of those, to your point, I love that term, Liz, what did you call it? The emotional
Oh,
savings.
your emotional savings account. I'm always like,
Yeah.
guys, you're overdrafting. Like you
I
need
love that.
you need to deposit more positive emotions into that savings account because
Right.
it's like that it's tipped the scale in one direction, and how
Yeah.
can you be mindful of doing something? And this seems like it can be an intervention
Hmm.
in the context of worry, but also it seems like
Hmm.
a nice preventative tool when you're in a
Definitely.
stressful period of time.
Right. I'm almost like
Hmm.
imagining people like having a little savoring, video file on their phone, right? Or a video
Mhm.
album.
I've made one of those. I made a playlist on YouTube of videos for me to savor, actually.
Oh
I
my
was
gosh,
thinking a
that's
lot about it when
brilliant.
I was. No, exactly. I had people, sending in videos that make them happy. And I thought, well, what videos make me happy? May as well take my own advice.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
know.
love
We
that.
love, as
Mhm.
I know, psychologists always love to give great advice and not take it. So I love that you have it in your phone.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really good segue too to you now as someone who is
Hmm.
doing this study, talking to friends, experiencing stress in college. What are some ways that you found, and you already mentioned one, like I use savoring
Hmm.
in these moments pretty purposefully. What are some ways that you
Hmm.
started to put it into your own life when you were at Skidmore?
I'd say one of the really impactful ways that I started using it was savoring like accomplishments and good things that happened to me. I find that, for example, in college, I always, really wanted to get good grades. And then I would get a good grade back on something and I wouldn't even really celebrate it. I would just be
Mm.
thinking about the next paper, the next class, the next test, the next grade I had to get. And so even just taking a moment to like pause and celebrate things was something I just hadn't really been doing. And so I started using savoring to really make myself stop whenever something good happened to me and say, like, I'm excited about this. This is a good thing that has happened. And I really started to savor positive emotions that I got from good things that had happened to me. So that's one of the ways I've started using it that I've found has made a really big difference for me.
I love that.
Maybe Felicia, if you were talking to your former self, aside from the way that you kind of shared
Hmm.
how you implemented it, or, Skidmore, students, what would you say to them that they could maybe do during this stressful period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say really just tuning in and paying attention to things that make you feel good is a lot more impactful than I think a lot of people think it's going to be. I know that I was, especially when I first started hearing about savoring, I would kind of think to myself, like, oh, I do that. I pay attention to positive things and I amplify my positive emotions. And then when you start really trying to do it, I at least realized I wasn't doing that very much. And so
Mm.
even just walking around and, seeing a pretty tree that I liked, or saying hi to a friend who I love, or, listening to a song that I really enjoy, just starting to really pay attention to and think about those things. I think it's a lot more different from, my usual way of being than I thought it was going to be.
And were there times where that got hard for you? Because again, as we just described, sometimes it's really great to give advice and to know what you should
Hmm.
do. And where were the times where you felt like, oh, I wish I could have used it there, or it was just so hard to get there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say it can be really hard to use savoring when I'm really anxious. Um,
Mm.
I think that for a lot of people, when you're really stressed or tired or sad or, whatever negative emotion, you can almost kind of want to like sink into that and not really want to get out of it. And positive emotions, for me at least, can feel uncomfortable, or trying to experience positive emotions can feel really uncomfortable when I'm really anxious. So there are definitely a lot of times where I wish I had at least tried to use savoring, where I was feeling really anxious, but instead I just kind of used worry to try to, reassure myself or, try to think my way out of my anxiety rather than use an emotional strategy.
Right. It it also sounds, if I'm correct here, that you're trying to like almost extend like your positive emotions like from
Hmm.
your experience. Are there any
Hmm.
like tangible ways that people can do that? Like I'm just like thinking out loud, but if telling someone what you're happy about, like your example when you're like really celebrating your successes, like is there like an
Yeah.
action step that you can do to kind of promote it?
There's lots of great things you can do. I think that sharing it with other people can be really helpful, making sure to focus on the positive thing with somebody else and share that with, people, especially people who are close to you. I'd say, especially for savoring, experiences, videos, things like that, something that somebody in my lab once said that they were doing while, trying to practice savoring with a video that I had made was think about things about the video that they liked, just kind of use your memory or perception of your experiences and focus on those things that brought you joy and just think about them again rather than kind of move on and think about the next thing. Think, oh, I just watched that show and I'm going to think about that part that was really funny, or I saw that dog that was really cute and I'm going to think about that dog or look at pictures, or different things like that can be really helpful, I think.
This has been so helpful. And if people are more interested in hearing about savoring and some of the research,
Hmm.
I don't know if your mentor, if you would have his sort of permission to say his name, but would they be able to look him up and find out more?
Yeah, his name is Lucas Lafreniere. He's now a professor at Skidmore. His dissertation is actually getting published soon, which is very exciting. But he does have some past research that should already be out there. Yeah, and I'm working on getting my thesis published too, but obviously it's a long process.
Oh yeah, we remember. It's probably why we put our dissertations away and never looked back.
I know.
Felicia, thank you so much.
Thank you, Felicia.
Yeah,
We're
thank you for
excited for
having
next steps
me.
for you.
Yeah, me too.
What a brainiac, am I right?
I know, Sarah. The list of college students that just soar past our college accomplishments just gets longer and longer every time.
I was asked if I wanted to do a senior thesis and essentially graduate with honors. And I was just like, will that require more work? And they said yes. And I said, okay, no, thank you.
See, I did it.
Of course you did.
I did one, Sarah, but like it was not published or presented at okay, I did present at a conference, but it was not it was not published. And 100% was not as great as Felicia's. And I love that it's so applicable to everyday life, even though it was used with a clinical population. And I'm really excited for you and I to talk about ways that we can practice savoring. And you're going to hold me accountable to actually practicing some of these things myself.
Yeah. But I will say that even though this is kind of maybe more research heavy than our typical guest, one of the things we want to do is bring this audience the most up-to-date scientific research when we know it. That's part of why we're interviewing people who aren't necessarily Instagram stars, but are the ones writing the books on this stuff. So thank you for bearing with us as we try to do that. Okay. Practical savoring tips.
Practical savoring tips. And are we going to stick with our ghost of Christmas past, present, and future?
Why not? Why not? Let's just bring it right in. So for the savoring ghost of Christmas past, so for reminiscing.
Reminiscing.
Reminiscing is easy when you have a smartphone.
Yes. So you could go back and look at any video or photo of a positive memory and really play it over and over and over again and notice things about your experience. One of the things Felicia talked about was paying attention to all aspects of our emotional experience. What did it feel like in your body when you're watching it, or the memory of what it smelled like or tasted like, whatever the experience was, really trying to reach on all aspects of the experience.
Another thing that you can look to for reminiscence is things like memorabilia. This is why people tend to keep concert tickets back in the day. The shoebox filled with memories you can go back to, or just remembering an achievement you made when you were kicking ass and people were happy for you in some way, basking in some of that memory.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that Felicia talked about was just planning to do it. Can I do this for 5 minutes each day in really like short time frames so that you're successful at doing it? Even one way I was thinking about in my quest to try to adapt this to my life is like, was there something I did that was kind today? What did that feel like when I was kind to someone? What was their reaction when I was kind to them?
And you can pair it with something you already do. If you wake up in the morning, I know my first thing I do is I get some coffee. I'm not even really that awake yet, so I'm not doing much anyway. I might as well use that 5 minutes and pair it with savoring. So sometimes a new habit is more easily done when you pair it with something you already have in your arsenal. There's also, present focused savoring are, like we talked about before, trying to notice the positive in a situation, as opposed to a lot of situations have both positive and negative in them. If you go to a party, you're going to likely have parts of it that are pleasant, parts of it that aren't. Mm-hmm. So savoring would be, how can I notice the parts that are more fun and try not to attend to the parts that were less pleasant. I also think that a good present focused one, if you're not engaging in something fun, right, a good one if you're not necessarily doing something positive, is trying to create a positive experience. And again, that smartphone, everyone can be an amateur photographer. So just going through and maybe taking some pictures that you find to be interesting or getting creative in some way. A lot of times being creative can create those positive feelings. And then, of course, there's future-oriented savoring exercises.
How would you do savoring of the future? What's one that you think you could do?
Well, a lot of times, if I'm not even able to plan a vacation that's coming up, like a great spring break, if it's not in the immediate future for me, is I will start to think of places I could go. I'll start to create a mental file of some options that I want to do, or I might go look on Instagram at different places that people have done that they've enjoyed. So planning for a positive event, even if it's not happening yet, actually works.
You know, I hear a lot from college students that I think this could possibly be an area for savoring. Good food is the ultimate currency in college. So my college students will be like, okay, Friday night, we always order out, or they go to a different restaurant. And I think I'm like this too. When I'm planning a meal and I'm like really getting excited about it and anticipating what it's going to be like, and it might be more novel or enjoyable.
Right. Just something a little novel, getting off campus. We used to go to this place before formals called Kyoto's, and it was so good. It was one of those stir-fry places, but you smelled so much like it afterwards.
That your hair.
To savor. Right. It was all in your hair. You had to shower. You essentially had to like change after to go to the formal, but it was fun to look forward to something as simple as that. So there's so much here. We didn't talk about listening to music. There's obviously a ton of stuff, but the idea is I encourage everyone listening right now to go and create some way, whether it's in your smartphone, whether it's in your dorm, just a place to remind you to try to do this. And again, for a few minutes a day, it still has a big impact, and create a way for you to savor on purpose for a few minutes each day.
And let us know how it goes.
Can't wait to hear. Thank you to our guests for sharing their stories and their advice. This podcast is for college students, and we want input by college students, so please reach out by text, email, or voice memo to collegesfinepodcast@gmail.com or 929-500-2231. Tell us your story, give us tips on topics you'd like to hear, or give us feedback about an episode.
Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at College is Fine Podcast for episode announcements and resources. And last but not least, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast. Every hit of that plus button helps us keep going.